Jeff Gallant. I am the Program Manager for Affordable Learning Georgia. If it has to do with ALG, chances are I'm the one doing it at the moment. I am here to talk about open educational resources, but I really want to make sure that this workshop is more of a hands-on Q&A type of thing, where I'm working with you on your specific individual needs and not talking about what OER are for a straight hour. I know that there are some people that need to leave for an 11 o'clock class, so I'm going to keep the presentation section of this pretty quick. And if you have any questions after the presentation about the content, that's fine. And then we're going to explore OER and creating it and look at what you are planning on doing and see what's best for you. Because when it comes to OER, there's not a simple turnkey solution every single time. It's a lot about knowing the basics and then being able to implement those for your particular subject. And of course, this is a Creative Commons Attribution license. You will get these slides later on. In fact, you'll get a bigger version of these slides later on because I presented to class last night, and that had a bigger presentation to it than this one, and it has a little bit more extra stuff that I'm not going to go through today. So what is open? So when we talk about open, there are so many different ways that we talk about it because we have different terms that we connect to it. Open access, for example, is the term for usually scholarly journal articles, sharing them through a repository. Usually it just means free access to them. We're not talking about being able to revise or remix these articles. Open source talks about the source code of a computer application. So for something to be open source, you need to be able to see all of the stuff that made that particular computer application. Now, open source doesn't necessarily mean free. It just means you can see the source code. You could replicate it, but chances are your stuff will be free. But there are some open source applications that are paid all the time. So open source is kind of different. A lot of people like to say open source when they talk about open educational resources for the first time because it's a bit of an analogy. It's something that they can draw between the two, but it's not quite the same as what we're talking about when we talk about open educational resources. So when we're talking about open education, we're talking about the 5 R's. And those are retain, redistribute, reuse, revise, and remix. And these are all very important for different reasons. So retain has to do with the commercial textbook concept of purchasing a digital textbook and then just having it go away. Sometimes that's through rentals, but also purchases will go away through DRM. Like accounts will just expire after a certain amount of time, and then you no longer have it. It's not like when you purchase a print textbook and you can put it on your shelf for as long as you want. So you want to make sure that when you have an open educational resource, that you can keep that resource for as long as you want. You should also be able to share that resource, to copy it and distribute it among many people. That's redistribute. It's especially helpful when you are sharing an open textbook with students. You can make a copy of it by putting it on like your learning management system, D2L. They can make a copy of it by downloading it. They can print it out if they feel like it. That is redistribution. You should also be able to reuse the content. So it's not something that's only used in that particular course, but you should be able to take it with you and repurpose it for whatever you would like. For example, there is an open textbook for anatomy and physiology that some nursing students were doing. They used it at first and then they would put it on their tablets and take it with them on their work tablets during things like their clinicals or doctor's residency. Revising the content is where it gets really interesting, and that's where kind of the open part of open educational resources gets very unique. Open Educational Resources should be revisable because our pedagogies all differ. I could teach concepts of biology and teach the same exact type of content that another professor is using to teach, but maybe in a different order, maybe worded a slightly different way, maybe with slightly different wording in one paragraph. Now, if you have a commercial textbook and you don't quite agree with it, you can kind of override it when you're in class, but you can't take that textbook, change a paragraph, and then have the students buy that textbook. Revising the content means that you can take any open resource, and if you don't particularly agree with how something's organized, or you want to make something sound a little bit better, or you want to update something for 2016 because it was made in 2015, you can totally do that. That's a permission that you have. Also, you should be able to remix the content. So let's say that I like this Pearson textbook over here, and I like this McGraw-Hill textbook over here, and I like this chapter out of this one scholarly monograph out of Harvard University Press. I can't take those chapters and make my own textbook out of them and say, here you go, without a lot of problems and a lot of copyright issues. Open educational resources should be combinable. You should be able to take a textbook chapter from Openstax and then a textbook chapter from Apex Calculus and put them together in your own open textbook. That would be a remix. Also being able to convert different things into different formats. So let's say I wanted to make a video out of a biology chapter. Well, I could use that as a script in an open educational resource without any problems. I'm not making a copy of that resource in any way. If you do it with copyright textbooks, commercial textbooks, it's a little bit different. You can't necessarily use that same textbook as a script the same way that you could. So remixing includes both bringing stuff together and making different versions of stuff. So when we're talking about open in educational resources, we're talking about it being freely available, like open access, but with permissions to revise and remix and to keep that content at all times. So some things are very free, but they're not necessarily open. Some things are open access, but they're not open educational resources. But what we're talking about with open, as in open education, is free plus the 5 R's. And how do we do that? Well, we usually do that through Creative Commons. These licenses started in the early 2000s, and they started from the standpoint of artistic endeavors like music, being able to give permissions immediately to people who want to remix your track or something like that. This was a lot easier to do than having someone contact you personally to get the rights, and then you got to go through whoever was publishing it and then get the express written permission or even deal with a lawyer. That stuff, you take care of the permissions right out of the gate. Instead of it being all rights reserved when you create something, you can attach a Creative Commons license that gives all users permission to do other things with your resource. Stuff that is beyond copyright. Now, Creative Commons doesn't void out copyright. It doesn't get rid of it or go against it. It works with it to say, within copyright law, I am giving you the permissions to do this stuff. I usually have the permission to do this stuff, but now you do. So there are a lot of different types of licenses, and you may have seen something like this before and seen, icons and abbreviations and went, oh great, more jargon for me to learn, what the heck is going on? But there are only a couple of building blocks to Creative Commons licenses that you need to know. The first one is BY, B-Y up here. That is attribution. That is the foundation of every Creative Commons license, that if you are going to make any kind of new version of something, if you're going to use some of the material from the thing that has an attribution license on it, you need to attribute the original work. Kind of like what I did down here, even though this is public domain, which is a little different. But you are making sure that you're using the title, the author if there is one, and a link to the resource. That's attribution. Now the other ones are added on to attribution in a Creative Commons license. So attribution stays put. It's always going to be CC BY dash something. or just BY, which means that you can do anything you want with it so long as you attribute it. Attribution share alike is kind of a combination of, yes, you have to attribute the original work, but it's a little bit like the open source software out there that's under the general public license, where if you make something out of this resource that I made, you have to use the same exact license on it. It's passing that freedom along the line. It's kind of paying it forward every time that somebody makes something out of your resource. It's really good for like keeping up the spirit of open. Share alike is really nice like that. When you're trying to combine a lot of different resources together though, share alike gets a little bit weird. So for example, somebody has attribution, non-commercial share alike on theirs, and you're combining it with something that's just attribution, and you want to put it under an attribution license, well, now you've got this other share alike over there. So share alike is great. It's responsible in a way that most open licenses aren't. It's passing it forward. But at the same time, it is complicating things a little bit. It's making things a little bit tougher for someone who wants to remix. Attribution non-commercial is basically what it sounds like. Attribute the original work and don't sell the thing that you used my thing in order to create. Non-commercial gets a little bit interesting when you're talking about print on demand. If you're sending students to a copy shop to get it printed out, they can't take a profit on that without it being a commercial use. So then it gets a little bit murky. There's a case going on in New York that has to do with Creative Commons non-commercial and printing stuff out. So non-commercial is pretty good. It does comply with a lot of institutional IP issues if they have them. You know, some schools have a policy where you absolutely have to make something non-commercial if you're going to share it. It enables that. And then you can just kind of add these on. So non-commercial and share alike. So even though this says CC, BY, NC, SA, it's really just 3 building blocks. Attribute it, you gotta share it under the same license, don't sell it. That's the BY, NC, SA. And then there's one other building block that we like to avoid in open educational resources if we can. And it's called ND, no derivatives. Or they say no derivatives because they want it to be a little smaller. This is kind of just like what it sounds like too. You can't alter the original in any way. So this works for open access. You can make something free and you can copy it, you can redistribute it, you can retain, you can redistribute, but you can't necessarily remix or revise if you've got an ND on there. Usually this is good if you're an artist, or if you're writing a research article with a whole bunch of raw data, because then you know that nobody can go and like falsify the data and just kind of attribute you. But at the same time, the attribution should be pointing you back to the original work. So even if you have something made that you don't necessarily agree with, it should be pointing back to the thing that you made. So ND is kind of a safeguard against ever having anything that's very personal to you, that you don't want revised in any way, still shared under an open license. For open educational resources, where, like I said, we all have different types of pedagogy, we all want to teach particular different things in different courses, we want to make it as local as possible to the people that we're teaching. No derivatives kind of gets in the way of that, because then you can't modify it. And then there's public domain. You can mark something as public domain that's current. It's not just all the old stuff that is automatically in the public domain. And it's not necessarily a license. It really just says that there are no rights reserved to the material that you created. That means no attribution or anything. So public domain is like the exception to all of these open licenses. Attribution is the building block to all of them, except for public domain, which means not even attribution. So no rights reserved. Now that's a lot to take in one small presentation. If you go to creativecommons.org and creativecommons.org/licenses, there's a description of each license on that page and what each license does, including the structure of it. You know, the difference between a machine-readable format and a human-readable format and the legal code behind it. And it's a really good refresher. I will go there, especially to check out the legal code if I click through a couple times. So with all of that said, you probably already know what an OER is because we discussed what open means in open education. An OER is any free resource plus the 5 R permissions that you use for education. And this is the Hewlett Foundation definition. Everybody uses this one. Teaching, learning, and research resources that reside in the public domain or have been released under an intellectual property license that permits their free use and repurposing by others, which is basically free plus permissions. And OER is not just about textbooks. There are also plenty of different things that you can use to teach, as you know, such as videos or music. Your lecture slides, if you want to make those open, they supplement an open textbook very well. Not everybody has lecture slides ready to go like a vendor would right out of the gate with an open textbook, so contributing those can really help. Tests and quizzes are usually an optional thing. Like for us at Affordable Learning Georgia, if you do a grant, everything that's created under that grant needs to be shared under an open license. But when it comes to tests and quizzes, those are optional because we really don't want all of those just shared out there in the open for students to download like 3 months before they get to your class. So some places have a program for that, like Openstax does, where they know that you are who you say you are. They do some vetting to make sure you are a faculty instructor. So they have some tests and quizzes that are there that students cannot get to. And students will try to get to them, and they won't be able to because there are people vetting that process. With us, we don't have that many people, so it's kind of tough for us to do that. Open images and photography, so I'm sure that you use plenty of images in your lecture slides. It's kind of common practice. And one of the big things that you deal with is who owns the copyright to this image that I'm going to be copying on there. If there's an open educational resource image, then it'll have an open license on it, and you can share it and attribute the original. It's very easy to do. And open anything else that you use to teach. I mean, teaching is a very open-ended process, so we're not saying that OER is a particular format at all. So let's look at one open textbook. Hopefully we can. Yesterday we had a browser issue with this, but I'm guessing this will be okay. Nope, that's not opening the link. Okay, well, let's look at Openstax textbooks anyway. So these are foundation-funded textbooks. They cost a heck of a lot to make because they have contributing authors from many different institutions, everywhere from MIT to a community college, and then they have a team of peer reviewers for each textbook behind the creation of it. So it is pre-production, peer review, the same way you would do in a scholarly journal. So they are really trying to ensure the quality of the content immediately. And so we've got stuff from mathematics, and some of these will overlap a little bit. There's college algebra, and then there's algebra and trigonometry, which is kind of a mix-up of those two. There's 3 volumes of calculus. We have 3 common calculus courses taught in the university system, so that's really good. Introduction to Statistics is one of their first ones they ever did. Some introductory stuff like pre-algebra and pre-calculus are new. Then we've got anatomy and physiology, astronomy. So let's take a look at concepts of biology. I can look at it through its web version. And what's great about the web version is that I can just link to any part of this. For example, if I wanted to have them read something at the beginning of their first day of class, I could just copy the link in here and paste it right into D2L, and they would get right to it. But you can also get the print version of the book. And let's go back a little bit here. I'll go to college algebra. I can download a PDF version of this book, and it is either high resolution or low resolution. High resolution, of course, means that it's going to be a bigger file. It's going to be better to read on a computer screen or a tablet. Low resolution is good for phones because it is a small amount of data, and small pictures aren't really going to matter when you're browsing it on a phone anyway. So it's the same content, it's just slightly lower resolution on the images. And this is what a low resolution one looks like. It still looks pretty good anyway. And these are linked, so for example, if I want to go to chapter 7.6, I can do that immediately. And yeah, you can just kind of browse that way. Obviously, these are searchable just using Control F. And yeah, that's a PDF, everybody's used to those. A lot of these also have some different versions of them. Like the Concepts of Biology, you can get a Bookshare version. This is for accessibility. Now, their PDFs are very accessible. They have a heading structure, a hierarchy to them. You can copy all the text and paste it, which means that screen readers are working very well with it. But if you want something that goes even further than that and enables screen readers to do even more interesting stuff, there's this Bookshare version. You can order a print copy of most of these. Openstax has a deal with the National Association of College Stores. You can sell them in the bookstore, that's not a problem. You can also download an iBooks version of some of these. It's $5 for the iBooks version. It's a premium version of it. But some people really like it. It's enhanced with different types of videos, and it's formatted in such a way that it works really well on tablets. And this is kind of an important point. Open Educational Resources, the material needs to be free in some form. But that doesn't mean that if you have a $5 version of it, that is suddenly not open. This is still an open textbook, but there's also this other iBooks version if you want it. So that is a look at an open textbook. I wanted to show a particular one though. Let's see here. I'm going to copy this link. Let's try to get through here. No? Really? Seems like keyboard shortcuts are not working so well. Copy icon. There we go. That's really interesting. Okay, never mind. So what I was going to show was a version of Openstax Concepts of Biology that a UGA professor took back in 2011 and made a new type of textbook with it. Basically took the different parts of it and remixed it together to fit exactly what she wanted to teach. Her philosophy on that was, you don't tailor your pedagogy to the open textbook, you tailor the open textbook to your pedagogy. So that worked really well, so long as I can get to it, but apparently not today. So with all that said, OER are a little bit tougher to find because you don't have representatives coming to you, handing you a brochure and saying, here we go, just make a deal, and there it is. It's a lot tougher because you have to go out and find the OER. So where are they? Well, you want to start with these smaller collections first. And this is kind of almost counterintuitive. You would think that you want to go right into the big stuff and get all of the, hey, all right, we'll do this, and get like all of the stuff immediately. But there's a lot out there. And so if you can go into a curated collection and find things for your particular course or subject, that really helps out. Openstax is obviously one of them. The Open Textbook Library at the University of Minnesota is a really good one. This is a curated collection of open textbooks from across the internet. So Openstax, they produce their own. With the Open Textbook Library, they are bringing them in, they're getting them post-production peer-reviewed by their professors. And it works out really well. So it's a nice small collection of open textbooks. SUNY Open Textbooks, they are creating their own at the State University of New York system. And these are much more geared toward the expertise of whoever wants to write an open textbook. So you get some interesting niche subjects that are coming out of SUNY Open Textbooks that wouldn't come out of something like Openstax, where they're trying to get the highest enrolled courses. And then there's the Washington Open Course Library. These are the most common courses in the Washington State University system. And these are all of the materials you would need in a Google Drive format. So you just go in and it's a Google folder and there's all the stuff, and it's very editable. You know, it's typically in Google Docs format, so you can put it into Word, you can completely change it very easily. Then you would want to move to the bigger collections. Openstax has a system called CNX. It's the same thing that I showed you to get to the web version of their book. And people have been able to publish their open textbooks using Openstax's CNX. It's a bit of an older system at this point, but there is a lot of helpful stuff in there. Merlot is another big collection. It's out of the California State system, and they have been doing this since the 90s. So when you're searching in Merlot, you're getting stuff all the way from 2016 back to the very early days of the web. And because of that, it probably shouldn't be the first place you look for OER, because at first, you may want to go into that small curated collection and you find the thing you want, and that's great. With Merlot, it's like a gigantic shotgun of information coming at you, and some of it is like old expired links, and some of it is just wonderful. So Merlot is a place you would go after you've checked out the smaller collections. Same with Oer Commons. Oer Commons is a global thing. It's focused on every grade level, so not as much higher ed as Merlot is. Oer Commons goes from K-12 all the way through higher ed. And it's a lot of web-based stuff. There's a good creation tool in Oer Commons that allows you to make kind of WordPress-style OER right on the spot. And now we have a place. This is Galileo Open Learning Materials. Affordable Learning Georgia is part of Galileo, which is, of course, is the virtual library in Georgia. And we have a new digital repository, and we are focused on sharing open educational resources created by the university system or through their partners. So for example, we have a partner in Openstax. We'll be linking to Openstax Textbooks from Galileo Open Learning Materials soon enough. Not at the moment. I'm the only person working on it, so I have to get all that done. But right now we are sharing everything that's been created out of a textbook transformation grant. We are also sharing our partnership with the University of North Georgia Press, all of the textbooks that they created, and we're going to be sharing anything that eCore has created outside of the University Press, North Georgia. So that is Galileo Open Learning Materials. You'll also want to explore a couple of different options that don't have to do with open textbooks. Of course, there's OpenCourseWare out there. MIT is a really big one for that. There are open access articles out there. If you are doing graduate work, obviously open access journals will really help. Google Images has a way to search. I can just show you really quickly how to do that. Go to images.com and I'll search for ferns because that is a safe thing to search for on Google. And I'll do search tools and usage rights. And this is all based on Creative Commons licenses. I mentioned machine readable format earlier. This is what winds up happening. You can read all of this. So if I wanted anything for reuse with modification, that's the most open. That's mostly CC BY license. And all of these I could use. Here's one from Wikipedia. And let's see, let's visit the page of it. And here it is. CC BY, so I can do anything with this so long as I attribute it. Creative Commons is built right in to the image itself on Wikipedia. You can also do this with YouTube. So now I've got 3,600 results, and let's say I wanted something with a Creative Commons license on it. All I have to do is click Filters, and here it is. And so I could share this thing on Fernet.
Okay, so
that apparently has a saxophone in it. Okay.
And you just slice and then roll, slice, roll, slice, roll. Roll, slice, roll.
And you can see right here, license Creative Commons Attribution, reuse allowed.
Slice, slice.
Now you can link to any YouTube video, and that's fine. You can link to anything, and that is legally fine, because you're not making a copy of that material. If you use the embed feature in YouTube, you are just sending the YouTube video over to something like D2L or LibGuides or something like that. That's not making a copy of the video itself. That is just pointing at the material as it originally is on YouTube. If you are going to copy something, like take a 5-minute segment of that Fern video and put it in your open textbook, that is making a copy of it. So if it has a Creative Commons license for reuse with modification, you're good. You just attribute it and it's in your open textbook. If it's not, if it's just what they call a standard YouTube license, that means that the creator has copyright, except YouTube has a couple of extra permissions. That means that it is all rights reserved, and you would have to get express written permission from the person who created it. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're looking at stuff out there on the web. And Google searching, you can do just about the same thing. So let's say I just wanted to Google ferns. Why not? How about foraminifera? How about that? That's not ferns, that's something else. If I go here, search tools. No, that's not what I wanted. Oh, they change this all the time. They used to have an advanced search that would let you do this very easily. But now, here it is, advanced search over on gears, usage rights, you can do it the same way. Free to use or share even commercially, free to use, share, or modify even commercially. Now I do an advanced search, and here is the Wikipedia article on it. In fact, Wikipedia is just really good with sharing stuff under Creative Commons licenses. Here is an open access article out of Nature, which is interesting about Paleosucaria, foraminifera. This is an older site, but has some interesting information on that. So that's a really good way to search for stuff. It's just that Google is starting to hide it because they like to keep their space as open as possible. But yeah, now it's over on this gear, and we've all learned this together. All right, so I have about 5 minutes before you would need to leave, so I've got to keep going here, but let's do this quickly. So I'm part of Affordable Learning Georgia. How can we help? Well, we are not going to administrators and telling them that you need to force your faculty to teach using OER or to teach using this one open textbook. We don't think mandates are a good idea. I think that that's really held up in commercial textbooks in the same way that is held up with OER. Choice is something that is very important to faculty. I mean, we are hiring you as subject experts, not as teaching robots here, let's insert open textbook here. So academic freedom is a big part of this. You should be choosing to use the open resources that you find, not forced to use this one particular open resource. Part of what is tough about getting an open resource into the classroom as opposed to a commercial textbook is that there is some extra work. Like I've showed you today, there's a lot of searching, there's a lot of evaluation, and then past that point, there's a lot of creation of materials that don't yet exist, but that you know about, so you have the expertise, you want to share it. That takes some time. That's why we do our textbook transformation grants. These are funding a course release for faculty or a course release / hiring of other experts such as librarians or instructional designers to help out with either the design or the finding and evaluating of resources or the hosting of resources. So that's what textbook transformation grants are about. They are about allowing you to have the time and expertise to get all of this done. Because as we're talking about it, it's not just inserting an open textbook into a class, just like how it's not inserting a new commercial textbook into a class. It's a transformation of that class using the new information that you have. So that transformation takes time, and we fund that time. And of course, if you have any burning questions about finding OER, evaluating OER, you want to ask your librarians. They have been helping out so much throughout this whole process. We have Louise Rice right here with us today, and she is our library coordinator at Affordable Learning Georgia. Every single USG institution has a library coordinator and a campus champion. They are your contacts that you really want to get in touch with as soon as you have an OER question. And if they can find OER for you, then that's great. If it's a bigger strategic question, they can get right in touch with me, and then I can answer without a problem. So there are going to be different contacts at Armstrong than there are at Savannah State, obviously. I can show you how to get there. So here's our site, Affordable Learning Georgia. I'm not used to it not auto-completing.org. Okay, so affordablelearninggeorgia.org. And we've got a lot of stuff going on here, but in About, there is the Champions and Coordinators link. And this will give you a list of every single champion and coordinator. So at Armstrong, you've got Lauren McMillan and you've got Delana Gajozik-Nivens, and they are very cool people. I would get in contact with them if you have any OER questions. And yeah, you can see down here at Savannah State, right in this second row are both Louise and Mary Jo, and they will gladly help you with all of your questions. All right. And in here, there's plenty of different stuff that you could learn about Open Educational Resources. We also are the only organization that takes by enrollment the top 100 undergraduate courses. And so right now we've got it showing 25, but now we are showing all 100 of them. Easiest way to look through it, because there are so many course numbers, is to search by title. So if I calculus. So for example, calculus, there seems to be a course number for every single course at every single institution that's different. It's not standard at all. So we've compiled all of the course numbers here, but just searching for calculus will bring it up. And then we have the American Institute Open Textbooks. We have implemented resources from a grant team, and then open textbooks on calculus right there. So that's an easy way to find stuff too. But yes, asking the librarians, particularly your library coordinator at first, really helps out. And of course, there's more than just Open out there. So free resources, like I said, there's still all rights reserved. You can't make copies of them, but you can point at them through links. There is a sustainability issue with links, of course, because some links change, some things go down all of a sudden. When that happens, you really do need to keep link checking. You need to make sure every semester that everything's up and running. You never know when somebody else owns all the rights to making copies, what's going to happen to them. And then library resources are very helpful too. They are of no additional cost to students, and you can link them to it, usually through a permanent link that will allow them to either log in immediately, or if they're in D2L, they're already logged in because they've got that automatic login. And that'll work out really well. Now, if you've got an ebook, just make sure that it is a multi-user or unlimited user licensed book. And if you have any questions about that, ask your librarians. You don't want to have a single user licensed book as your textbook, because all your students, they're probably going to do stuff at the same time, which is usually the night before, and they'll all try to access the textbook at the same time and find out that only one of them was able to use it. So do not use a single user licensed ebook for a textbook. I came in as an e-resources librarian at my institution back in Valdosta State, and one of my first questions was exactly that. Why can't only one student get to the textbook that I selected from your e-resources? And I went, you guys use our e-resources as textbooks? That's really cool. Oh, wow, your regular textbook is very expensive. Now I see why.
And we had that very same thing that happened here with a class that the professor, and it was really a disaster.
Yeah. So yeah, multi-user, unlimited user licenses are the way to go. Low-cost resources might be necessary if you are in mathematics, for example. You may have already been teaching with something like Pearson's My Math Lab, and that's very expensive, especially when it's bundled with their Pearson textbook. If you are moving to an open textbook, you may need to find a way to do online homework if that's what you would like to do. There are some open source solutions, so actual open source code solutions like WebWork. You can host that on a server. It takes a little bit of cooperation with IT at that point, but if you do have that kind of relationship with IT, then that's great. UNG, I know, has WebWork installed on their IT's servers, so they can just kind of use it whenever they want. Low-cost versions of these types of things, WebAssign, Sapling Learning, these are different types of smaller solutions that are either not connected to any textbook or connected to open textbooks like Openstax. They are not free because they need some staff behind them to maintain them, but they are at least low cost. And some of these will give the material that students paid for once to them for the rest of their lives. Like Boundless Learning, they get to keep all of the material. They're just not in that course taking those quizzes anymore. And so yeah, with our grants, we are now in our 7th round, and we've been saving over $16 million per academic year. That was great to meet you. And we are going to keep going with that so long as we still have funding, because funding the time for faculty and librarians and instructional designers to come together and transform a course to absolutely no cost or to very low cost has really paid off for our students, and we want to keep moving that forward. But beyond cost savings, a lot of people really like the curated diversity of materials that you might come up with in your course. For example, if you're a graduate student, you often have a course pack that someone had put together. It's something that fits that course exactly, but it's kind of a choir of different voices, different experts on different parts of a subject. So it works out really well for them in that they have this connection with you, that you have taken all of these resources and selected it for this particular course, as opposed to this one voice from this, one company that they hired, telling you everything that you need to know about a particular course. And it's also a sign that you care about them, that you're engaged in the course, that you've gone through all of the effort to get all of this OER in one place, to make whatever you need to make that isn't out there already. And then students do not have to pay for their textbook. They are really happy about that, and they would probably be a bit more engaged themselves as a result. And it's a reason for students to do their work. If you have something that is open, you don't even have to worry about a login at that point. Open educational resources are freely accessible, so you don't need a username or password to get to them, which means that they really have no reason beyond the internet just not working at all for them to not access their material. And we've heard that right in our first rounds, that students said they had no excuse not to do their work because it was right there, ready for them on day one. And yeah, it turns out it's a little bit more personal because of that. The students really like that you are the one who's collaborating on these materials, that it's not just you're going to one outside source and kind of conferring authority to them. It is your stuff, and they really like that part. So we are going to actually start looking at things that you want to do after this, but do you have any questions on this presentation? Yes?
I actually just have one question. It was more of a platform, and forgive me, I did come in a little bit late, you might have already covered it. The resolution, so if it's on the screen, is there a range for resolution? And the other thing is, as far as browser, does it play better with one browser than the other as you're going through a little bit over resource?
Okay, so what we're looking for... Oh no, I'm just trying to think about it. So there's a couple of questions in there. The first one is like, does resolution matter on a particular platform? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm asking you what is the range of resolution? As far as something comes in, it might be a 720, it might be a 1080p.
Oh, no, that
resolution.
Yeah, that depends. I mean, if you're going to have like a 1080p screen, then you'd probably want the high resolution version of it on Openstax. If
So that's what I was asking, is there a high resolution and is there a range?
Yeah, there's one that's high and one that's low, but other than that, it really just has to do with the photos themselves. The font will typically scale because it's just kind of how it's built. But yeah, other than that, when it comes to browsers, usually we're dealing with pretty common file formats. We're not dealing with like the absolute newest stuff out there that's based on a particular new plugin or something like that. Every so often there might be, but it depends on your computer and your browser. For example, this computer doesn't necessarily have the most up-to-date version of Chrome on it. It's kind of displaying Openstax in a really weird way because Openstax just did a new website that is based on code that wasn't quite ready for this one. But if I went home and went on Google Chrome, I have the newest version on there and I'm fine. So it really kind of depends on your own browser, but really there hasn't been a thing where a particular open resource works better on like just Firefox or just Microsoft Edge, which is what they call it now, which was Internet Explorer. But if something doesn't work on one browser, just move to the other one and it usually is fine.
The only reason I asked because you mentioned D2L and I know that it doesn't play well with Internet Explorer.
Oh,
so I try to always let them know, please go to Chrome, Firefox. If you're on the Mac, please use Safari, something of that nature. So I was just wondering in the exchange of it if there was a recommendation for that. But you answered it well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I mean, it's a good general rule to never use Internet Explorer. That's basically it.
Yeah, I'm not going to buy into that one.
Well, I mean, Microsoft has canceled their support for Internet Explorer.
Right, I know.
Anything else? All right, so the other thing I want to show you, this is not a presentation thing. Oh, hey, wait a minute. Okay, well, let me just show you something here. What an Oer Commons. There are many different platforms out there, and some of them are completely free for you to create and share material. You can click Create here, and well, you do need an email account, a username, and password to do it. And I don't have it on this computer, so it'd be kind of tough. But you can create OER right from here using a WordPress-esque platform that works very well with Google Docs. And so this is a really easy way to get something up and hosted immediately. Now, if you created something and you want it to be shared with the world, here is Galileo Open Learning Materials. We have different ways to browse this. You can go by subject. And so, for example, in biology, we have ancillary materials, open textbooks, and grants collections. For the open textbooks, we have a couple. One that was the Instructor's Guide to Concepts of Biology for the course that they taught, which is chapters 12 to 21. We have an Introduction to Environmental Science, and then we have 2 lab manuals for Principles of Biology. These were created under textbook transformation grants. You can see this uniform cover that we came up with for that. If you check out our grants collections, this is an easy way to implement a set of OER and know all of the lessons that they learned from that implementation right off the bat. So this isn't necessarily an open textbook, but it does cover all the content for a course. So for example, let's go to Introduction to Environmental Science. You can see on here that everybody is listed who authored or assisted with the grant project. You've got the full text, and then you've got each of the separate files. There's a linked syllabus. There's the original proposal for the grants that shows what they wanted to do, their desired outcomes. Then their final report, which shows what they found, what they researched, and what they learned. And there's a Word version of the whole thing. So if you want to take part of their syllabus and change it up, you can totally do that using a Word version. And it is Creative Commons Attribution. So if I go to download, it will just load it right up on screen for me, and I, of course, could download it to my computer past that point. And it kind of defines what a grants collection is in the Creative Commons license. And that says, unless otherwise indicated, just in case something else is under a different license. And here's their entire syllabus, including all of their links to what they are covering in class at that time. So here's their thing on human demography. They created this, and it's under an attribution non-commercial share alike. And here is their chapter 3, and they can go through everything that they've covered right here. So grants collections can really help because they have both the structure of the course and all of the research that they did on it, all the lessons learned. In some ways, it's kind of a better salesman for some of these than an actual salesman because they have outcomes that came right from USG professors built right into these. So that's what a grants collection is. Then we have them for different ones, and it depends on what's available and what isn't. So for example, computer science, information technology, we don't have an open textbook for that, so it won't show up here. You can also go by author if you happen to know somebody who authored a text. And I can go here. I look at Cecil Jones, Principles of Chemistry at Savannah State. This was one of the teams from Savannah State that got a textbook transformation grant. And here is the full text of everything that they did. Sometimes it takes a little bit, depending on how big the file is. And here is the syllabus for him. And here's the chapters that they used in each unit and all of the objectives that they had. So these are all the learning outcomes for each unit with the chapters that they were using, and then even an exam schedule there. And then you've got the proposal, including the per student savings, what they originally used, what their plan was, their transformation action plan, how their review happened, their course materials, their design. And then you've got the final report, including different quantitative and qualitative measures. So student satisfaction was very high. For this one, drop-fail withdrawal rate was lower than usual. And that was a positive outcome and higher performance over previous semesters. So that worked really well. These are very honest. So if you go into one and one says, neutral, negative, it will totally do that. We want to make sure that we are sharing exactly what the outcomes are. And they even have sustainability plans and their future plans to either update this material or take it on the road and present. So this is a way to learn from other grant teams and implement their solutions without having to reinvent the wheel or create an entirely new open textbook. So these tend to help out very much. So with that, I would like to just bring up these two. I wonder if I can open the window. No. Well, I'm going to put up these small collections here, and I'd like you guys to look around at what you would like to use for your course. Now, if you're librarians, that's probably not going to help out too much. But check out Open SUNY because they have an information literacy user's guide there. It's really good. But let's check this stuff out, and I'll be talking with each one of you. And if you have any questions, let me know at that point. So, thank you very much. And you got to head out.